Up, you guys? Here, let me make a little shift ski real quick. Boom. Hey, Alchemist Ganjier here, and I'm super excited for tonight. Like, so excited. Cannabis in Vietnam. Um, wow, just this wow, right? Um, Apologize for the late start on this stream. In fact, normally I even have a little like loading, like a stream is loading screen that's up, just to get things populated. So most of you guys are going to be seeing this message are going to be in the restream anyway. uh, like at least this section of it. So just like welcome. Today, like, we're talking cannabis in Vietnam. Uh, very exciting. I've got two awesome guests representing the Zomia collective, Brandon and Josh. Um, how are you guys doing today? Uh,
Fantastic. Super happy to be here,
Yeah,
man. Stoked.
very well. Yeah, thanks for having us on, man. Much appreciated.
yes, yeah, awesome to have you guys on. Yeah, again, apologize for the late start. We are having some technical difficulties. There's some streaming. Ryan, get on the stream. Ryan Toffer, a gentleman that set this interview up. He had to unfortunately, I think, pull out because I think maybe some of the technical difficulties was coming from his side of the stream. I don't know, but we're going to try and like push on the best we can, and if he's able to get himself situated and then join on in a bit, then wonderful. But like yes, let's first talk a little bit about just honestly, I mean, I was mind blown when Ryan first told me. He said like, hey, like Brandon and Josh, Zooming Collective, they're in Vietnam right now, um, and like would be interested and like talking about like cannabis in Vietnam. And my first response was cannabis in Vietnam, what? um, it's I am in my head, like, of course, like you think Vietnam weed, like the just the drug scheduling act, uh and you hear and I heard about soldiers smoking weed in Vietnam, but honestly, like aside from that, I have just like zero concept of this whole thing. But like I getting a little bit of ahead of myself. Before we really start talking about like just that whole thing, I'd like to talk a little bit about this collective that you guys have, the Zomia collective. Would you mind telling
Of course.
us, the audience, a little bit about like what this group is and like what it like, I guess, this mission statement.
Sure. Sure. Our collective formed about 3 years out ago, out of a sort of a political activism milieu, people who care about their communities and our environment around us. There's a pretty severe degradation both of the culture and of the plants out here. A lot of deforestation and such. And so we felt like there was a timer. We have so much time to act in order to keep the cultural heritage of Southeast Asian cannabis alive, and there's so much of it. There is so much of it, and so we formed a group with some of our buddies, and we've never looked back. We've been trying to connect essentially Southeast Asian farmers with the wider cannabis audience in order to provide equity for their genetics, disentangle them from the pressures of the commercial market and the mafia and such in terms of selling flower by working with the genetics instead. And so it's been 3 years that we've been partnering up, traveling around, trying to make as many connections, trying to source as many different genetics as possible. And here we are. So Zomia itself is a concept that encompasses about 220 languages, 100 million people. It's the highlands of Southeast Asia and South Asia. And so, yeah, we're currently in Vietnam, but we do work in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, India, Bangladesh, everywhere where there's wheat that fits into the description of Zomia. So there's about, let's say, 50, 60 people loosely affiliated with the collective, farmers and administrators, everything in between. And then there's a couple of us who are full-time doing coordinating between the different regions. It's kind of self-selecting as far as the kind of person to grow landrace cannabis in an isolated valley is also the kind of person who doesn't leave the isolated valley. So there's room
Mhm.
for us to come in there and make those connections, and that's what we're all about, bringing the community together.
Yeah, that's very, very awesome. Yeah, I said something you said that kind of like stood out to me, that like the preservation of like these cannabis cultures in Southeast Asia. Like, do you notice that there seems to be like an erosion of like the cannabis culture
Oh
there? Like,
yeah,
is it very
oh
like
yeah. I mean,
anti-cannabis? I know it's illegal in a lot of these countries still.
yeah, I would say that that definitely plays a part in it, but counterintuitively, prohibition actually aids conservation in some limited fashion.
Right, right.
But to give you an example, like the minute Thailand legalized, we were sitting in a newly opened coffee shop, which was kind of focusing on land races, and a bunch of Americans kind of came in like, "Yo, we're gonna teach you guys how to grow weed properly," and it's like, wow, we kind of been doing our thing for a couple thousand years over here, so not sure we really need to modernize, but that's generally where the pressure comes from, is farmers trying to remain competitive, especially farmers who grow for mafia or for military or police. They feel the need and they have direct pressure on them in order to remain competitive and provide a product that people are going to smoke. Tourism being a huge thing here in Southeast Asia, and tourist demand for cannabis probably being the sort of the second major driver of consumption rather than the locals themselves. There's been a lot of people coming here and saying, where's the good weed at? Because they're coming at it from a very Eurocentric, North American centric point of view, and they're disappointed to not see, dense nugs of, I'm just going to say Kush or whatever, right? And so yeah, there's a lot of pressure on farmers to grow modern strains, to grow in more modern, efficient environments. And this is probably where the main pressure comes from on the conservation front. I would say maybe only pollen on the wind being the other major cause of the degradation of the populations themselves. As far as the culture goes, certainly prohibition puts a huge impact on that. We do still live in total illegality, particularly in Vietnam, where the communist party is ruling with a fairly, let's call it an iron fist in terms of the enforcement of drugs. Typically, people can get away with paying bribes up until they can't. So it's a really sort of mellifluous situation. It's hard to situate yourself and to find stability as a member of the community and of the culture. And so yeah, it feels a little bit like an assault from all angles. But hey, that's the world we live in today, huh?
That's a like that was a very, very awesome answer. I really got sucked into that. That was something, that was an angle that hadn't really considered, but seems really obvious as far as like cultural erosion is, like when you're faced with like Instagram and social media, like telling you like what weed can look like, without necessarily that same connection to like actual like true quality, or like like
Yeah,
will it smell good, does it smoke good, does it taste good. Um, like, yeah, that's crazy, because on one hand I imagine that there are some things that can be learned from um you know interacting with other cultures, like like ways of approaching cultivation that don't really change the culture but like enhance their practices. But then on the other hand, when you can grow good indoor weed pretty much anywhere in the world, and you have somebody getting at you being like, hey, we want I want what I see right here.
of
That like,
course.
wow, that's crazy. That is, yeah, that is absolutely crazy. So
Mm.
so with Vietnam, I did a little bit of homework when I like in preparation for this. And one of the things I had noticed was that that they do have very stiff laws
Mm.
on at least on the books, as far as
Right.
like drugs and like cannabis, that like cannabis possession, um, and I guess the transport of such could even be like penalized with like death, like they could get like the death penalty from that. But that like by and large, the in an effort to be more tourist friendly, that they're trying to be like lenient towards that. Have you noticed there being a different like stance towards like cannabis between like locals and tourists, or does it seem to be like kind of like all the same? Or
Oh yeah, no, enforcement is not uniform across the board. It's very much situational, contextual. Um, I would basically put it this way: a Vietnamese person is far more likely to do prison time than a foreigner for the same offense, and a lot of that will come down to socioeconomic status, in the sense that a lot of the foreigners who are out here have the money to have left their home country, come out here, which correlates heavily with having enough money to pay the bribes necessary to not get arrested. Life can be a little bit cheap out here, you know. $500 could mean the difference between 20 years in jail or not. And I think for a lot of people in the U.S., that it's a lot of money, but it's also not a lot of money for your freedom.
yeah, right. I mean, yeah. What like, can you really put a price on your freedom?
Right,
Right.
right.
So, I right. So you guys are in Hanoi, right
That's
now.
correct.
Right? And
Yeah.
Hanoi, Vietnam. That now something I had read was that like if you were going to Vietnam and you were going to be a part, like trying to participate in the cannabis culture, and like traveling around the country, they said that they were talking about that there was a couple of places that you would want to stop, and make sure that you stocked up. And it was like they talked about Saigon, but they kept focusing on Hanoi. And
Mm.
I didn't want to like because this is such an exciting topic. I didn't want to like give myself any spoilers in case like this rabbit hole is going down and ended up telling it all. So like, I wanted you guys to really like reveal like what's going on in Hanoi that has really got the cannabis scene popping.
Well, it's the capital of the country, so the cultural center. And as far as that goes, there's a pretty thriving indoor growing scene with a lot of the young generation Vietnamese taking up the mantle of American, European style growing. And so, for a lot of people who are coming here, they don't even consider smoking what they would call bushweed. Not that all land races end up turning out like bushweed. And so, yeah, Hanoi, Saigon, the major cities are going to be seen as the place to stock up, because that's where you're going to be able to find easier than other places modern hybrids for cheaper prices. Otherwise, sort of the classic sort of tourist trail cities on the beaches and stuff, everything gets more expensive because at the beach, right? So a lot of people will be landing in one of the major airports, whether that's Ho Chi Minh or in Hanoi, and yeah, trying to stock up so that they can then go into remote areas where they could also be scoring, but they wouldn't be finding hybrids, and so it's not even in their mindset for a lot of tourists. But as far as locals go, locals be smoking up and down the country, from smallest village to the biggest city. And as far as what they're smoking, other than locally produced, primarily indoor, given the legal situation, there's not a lot of large scale outdoor growing of high THC varietals in Vietnam. Most of the product is finding its way either from Laos or Cambodia, who are the two major suppliers of cannabis to Vietnam. So if you're in the south of the country, you are much closer to Cambodia. And there's very well established mafia networks bringing in kilos and tons, on a regular basis into Ho Chi Minh City from Cambodia. Of course, Lao weed makes its way down south too, and Cambodian weed makes its way up north. But yeah, Hanoi is much closer to the Lao border, and so there's much more Lao weed there that can be found. At least historically, these days I'm seeing much more Cambodian than anything else. But
So then, I guess the obvious next question, for like this competition that this seems that's happening in Vietnam between Laos and Cambodia, is who's got the better weed? Is it Laotian or is it Cambodian? Like
yeah, well,
it
it's
sounds
like
like it
choosing
sounds to me
between your babies,
it
like
sounds like Laos is traveling because you said like they said that like Laotian weed makes its way south. Like I mean,
uh,
do we see a
uh,
lot of Cambodian weed making its way north?
yes,
Like,
yes, 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 yes. Like
uh,
I said, these days we see really a dominance of of the Cambodian weed. That's the more typical find for your average stoner looking to score for the first time. Of course, when you're well integrated and connected, we can get anything from anywhere. And there's a lot of couriers running weed up and down the country in order to make that happen. But yeah, if you were to come straight off the boat into either Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh, you'd be probably more likely to find Cambodian if we're talking about land races than anything else. Saying that, there's, in my opinion, nothing that really sort of makes Cambodian weed stand out over the Laotian weed, on paper at least. But I have a really soft spot for Cambodian. I've been smoking that for a while, and there's a certain sort of let's call it the epitome of Cambodian weed for me is a really sweet, sticky, overripe red mango character, which is just really easy to appreciate across the board. Everybody loves mangoes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wonderful. Sometimes it has a little either like a little garlicky edge from some, maybe some volatile sulfur compounds, or it's coming at you with a little bit of camphor or menthol, where you've got this slightly less ripe mango with a little bit of mint.
Oh, okay, so you're getting like a pretty. You can. It sounds like that's a pretty chill, like, like relaxing, but maybe not too relaxing, like kind of weed.
You'd imagine it, but I mean, I just got off the phone a couple days ago with one of our testers who's been growing out in the States, and he said from two phenos of the same Cambodian, one put him up straight pure sativa, and then an hour later, boom, heavy munchies, like a little hit of indica, whereas the other pheno was just soaring up and up and up and up without stopping. So
Oh, wow.
we still have biodiversity out here, so it's really
Yeah.
hard to quantify what we actually have, and there's a lot of diversity. Yeah.
No, yeah, a lot of diversity.
But in my experience, guys, it's only been the latter from what I'm smoking in Southeast Asia. It's the soaring highs, it's the borderline paranoia highs, which is quite nice in the right situation, but easy to overdo.
Yeah, I mean, which kind of makes sense because we're talking about tropical band cultivars, or I guess land races.
But I think I'd like to take the opportunity just to dispel a little bit of a myth. There's it's not all jungle out here, like for example, one of the major producing areas in Cambodia that exports to Vietnam is in the rain shadow of a big plateau where it doesn't rain that much, and if you were to come off an alien spaceship and land right there, I don't think you'd be describing it as jungle, maybe more savanna.
Huh.
Really dry, lots of sand, sparse tree cover. So yeah, we are in the tropics, but it's not all sort of a hot, sweaty, humid jungle, which is well suited for narrow leaf drug type cultivars.
Right. Okay, maybe that's even why like we're seeing like a bit of a spread in terms of like the drug effects. Is that like if you have maybe some little outdoor grows that are like sneakily happening in some of these like more isolated areas. So okay, so we're hearing a lot about like Laotian weed and a lot about Cambodian weed, and but like Vietnamese, and we're hearing about Vietnamese indoor. So like so what's going on with their outdoor? Because I heard some like there was a reference to like bushweed. So is this just like they're just like not really like trying to like evolve like those grows? Is it like what's going on with their weed? I guess.
Well, there's not a lot of it. So Vietnam historically, we're going to get really deep into the politics and the ethnography here. So basically, the Vietnamese people are the Kin people, who find their sort of their Ur Heimat, their cultural home in northern Vietnam, and over the course of the last 1,000 years have essentially colonized their way down south along the coast, the Long March southwards, it's called. In the process, they assimilated, displaced, and in some cases maybe even genocided the indigenous people. The two major groups of which in southern Vietnam would be the Cham people and the Cambodian people. So in the lowlands of the Mekong Delta in southern Vietnam, where Ho Chi Minh City is, This would have been the heartland of Khmer Krom culture, which is Cambodian speaking, totally related to Cambodians in Cambodia.
Right.
Along sort of the coastal south and middle of the country, we see the Cham people. And then in the interior of the country, where it gets incredibly hilly, there's a bewildering array of different ethnic groups. I think 53 different ethnic groups recognized
53?
by. Yeah.
Is that
So you
just
can go from village to village. They're speaking entirely different languages, growing dissimilar crops, maybe having differences between sort of slash and burn agriculture, paddy rice or mountain rice, and yeah, all the crops sort of tie into the culture in that regards. And so during this period of the establishment of the Vietnamese state in what is today sort of central and southern Vietnam, a lot of what would be described as indigenous culture was lost. If anywhere, this is where indigenous cannabis would have been found. The Cambodians, the Khmer grow cannabis. They have, for as far as they're concerned, grown it forever.
right?
And so cannabis in southern Vietnam would have been much more common before the Vietnam War, before the end of World War II, when sort of control was reestablished by foreign powers, and then later on again the northern Vietnamese. Today, given the marginalization of the majority of these groups in terms of the socioeconomic opportunities presented, and the fact that it's pretty easy to crack down on a weed field if you're a policeman, and it's much more justified when that's being grown by a minority group in the eyes of the dominant group. So
Right.
we haven't really seen much, and that might just be because of who we are and where we're at. Not invited to the party or something like that, but I'd feel pretty confident in saying that the majority of land-raised cannabis in Vietnam finds its origins not with Vietnamese people at the very least, but with other ethnic groups. And if it's physically in Vietnam, being grown for a long time, I would still hesitate to say that the genetics made their way from what we today call Laos and Cambodia.
Okay. So yeah, there is like so you can understand that just this whole environment that they've got here is kind of just not really given the chance to fully like um, really like develop into something that's pretty thriving. So then I'm curious about I guess like what.
What are we doing there?
Well, no, I mean, not like what you guys are doing there, because honestly, a lot of what's happening there sounds not too different from what I was hearing about in like the Himachal Pradesh region, with like like people like being marginalized, like the groups of people in the mountains trying to make cash for a living, and then every once in a while the police come up and destroy all their stuff, before then turning around and buying hash for them at the bottom of the mountain. like and so like I like then I can kind of like get that. I guess like the question is like if on the production side that they're like feeling that type of suppression that most of the weed is coming from out of the country, like how that has affected the way in which they go about consuming cannabis. Like, do they have smoke circles? Is it like mostly like people just kind of going off and like smoking on their own, kind of like everybody's a solo toker? Like, or do people use hookah? Like, what does a smoke circle or what does like typical cannabis consumption in Vietnam even look like for a person, like whether they're native or a tourist?
Right. Well, so again, we'll be. I'm assuming you're talking about Vietnamese people, and so as far as that goes, without having their own indigenous wheat, there's no set of practices really that I would say are strongly inherently Vietnamese as far as joint rolling or bong smoking and everything else. And on top of that, there's a huge demographic of Vietnamese who, um, let's say, escaped to the U.S. as refugees during the political upheaval and violence of the last century or so, who have then gone back to Vietnam and brought with them a very American style of smoking. So a lot of this indoor that's consumed, I see it consumed in bongs, I see it consumed in blunts. We see even OCB rolling papers on the street in little stalls in Hanoi. I would say that modern cannabis culture here, you can almost one for one it with what's going on in the States or in Europe. It's this international style.
You
Yeah.
all hearing this? This mofo said bongs and blunts, bongs and blunts, bongs and blunts. I mean, I am mad at it. I am mad at it. I am very curious though about the bongs. Like, are we talking glass? Are we talking like clay? Are we talking wood? Are we talking like the geez, I hate it, silicon.
Right,
um,
right, right.
yeah, like
Well, yeah, a little bit of everything. There's a ton of smoke shops in Hanoi selling everything. I mean the sort of the name that everybody's had for the last, like, I don't know how long, but I guess 15 years has been Ruhr. That was sort of a prestige
yeah.
piece for certain people. But there's also there's a sort of a tobacco concentrate which is consumed very commonly on the streets in a big bamboo wooden bong and pipe. And so it's
Oh,
designed and meant for smoking tobacco concentrate, but you
it's
can
like a steam
easily smoke a
chalice.
little. You know what? In terms of shape and appearance, it pretty much looks like that. Yeah. It's a long, bamboo down tube with a little piece. A lot of it will be hand carved, some of it with designs and stuff. And then there's also opium pipes. And so there's definitely things that you can smoke weed out of that are not, US centric or Eurocentric. But it really just depends on the individual, how their smoking is westernized or not. And then that's just talking about, foreigners and Vietnamese people. As far as the ethnic minorities who do cultivate cannabis, and that's something we didn't really mention yet, is that there are people growing
Yeah.
cannabis here. It's just not high THC varietals. So the Hmong ethnic group has legal permission from the state to cultivate hemp, and they are among several groups who do so. And while the vast majority of the production is geared towards construction materials, oilseed, fiber, etc., there's still the odd uncle, as there is everywhere in the world, who likes to have a weed toke. They're going to go and look for the inflorescences that have that higher oil content, and over the years, they're going to be, naturally selecting for something a little bit more potent. And so, yeah, we do see the consumption of landrace. I'm just going to call it hemp, but still with some cannabinoids in it. And out in the sticks, that's certainly being consumed in a bamboo bong or bamboo water pipe, whatever you want to call it. There's no smoke shops in the mountains. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're making all kinds of like a different type of makeshift bong. So would the bamboo bong be like the most common type of constructed like bong, or is there like anything else that you've seen that's just been kind of like, man, that's crazy. I can't
Uh,
believe you turned that into a bong. Like you
I
turned
mean,
that.
sure, yeah. Yeah. I mean, humans are creative and resourceful, right? We'll turn anything into a bong if we really need to smoke it. But given the sort of the availability of bamboo and just how quality it is for
Yeah.
making bombs and how cheap it is, it's easily the most common material for sure.
Wow, that how awesome, awesome,
Mm.
very awesome. So then like so these smoke circles are like pretty similar to our own. You got like okay. So I'm like picturing these type like these smoke circles. People are getting together, kind of similar to us. Hey, who all's throwing in? Hey, what's up? Is this like as far as like the Western culture we have? Okay. Let me back it up a second. So while learning about Pakistan, learned that smoking with like hash was such an integral part of the culture that it was pretty common for folks to be more or less wake and bake. And they get up, they pray, they make some tea, and they smoke a hash cigarette. Um, like how does that integrate into like the Vietnamese lifestyle that you guys have like noticed like in there? Is it one of those things where people are like token like right away, or is it one of those like kind of like, no,
Well, just to be clear, now you can pretty much tell neither of us are ethnically Vietnamese, so
no,
maybe
yeah, I well,
maybe you'll need to get a Vietnamese person on to answer some of these more specific cultural
yeah,
questions because I don't feel Vietnamese enough to describe a typical Vietnamese day. But I've observed people, waking up and getting on the streets, smoking that tobacco concentrate from the moment that they wake up. And so I'd imagine that just like stoners everywhere else, when we use it for medication, we want to be medicated, or some of us want to be medicated every waking moment. And so yeah, I'd imagine, and I have witnessed people smoking from sunrise to sundown. Absolutely. Yeah.
No.
I would say one thing is that given the cheap prices, if you are well connected and you are a serious stoner who is medicated all day, it's really not going to be this whole like sort of puff puff pass, kind of a little bit stingy in the sharing. It's very much more so like smoke to your heart's content and fill because we got a lot of weed here.
Yeah, and that's actually you got right. You rolled right into the next thing I wanted to ask, which was like you mentioned, like the prices, like for weed and whatnot, and like expensive and cheap, but like it's a pretty relative thing. Heck, even in the states here, it's
Yeah,
pretty relative. So,
yeah.
like, what are we talking for like prices of weed? Like, are people like buying it by the gram or buying it by the O? Like, um,
Well, again, it depends who you are. If we're talking about the tourist market, which again is a pretty significant one, people are largely or are mostly buying smaller amounts for sure.
right.
Let's put some numbers on it. So, in Cambodia, the point of export in the production regions, it's going to be starting at around 25 cents a gram, but you're not buying in grams there, you're buying in pounds. I mean, farmers don't even really want to talk to you if you're not buying a couple
Yeah,
pounds.
don't waste their time.
This is yeah, basically. By the time the generals, the mafia, or whoever is taking it across the border takes it, the prices increase significantly. You're looking at, let's say, not much less than 50 cents to $1 a gram anywhere, because that's not much more than the cost of production in Cambodia or in Laos. But it can go really, really high. So we were recently just messing around with a couple locals who wanted us to try their indoor, and we get hooked up for as little as 100,000 Vietnamese dong for some really good quality, Western style indoor. How much is that in dollars, you reckon, Josh? It's maybe like three, four, three,
Yeah,
$4 a gram,
$5.
maybe
$5.
$5 a gram, yeah. And that would be considered like a relatively good price for somebody who doesn't, have many connections or anything else. It can easily go up to $30 a gram for a tourist fresh off the boat who doesn't know what he's doing. So
Right.
yeah, there's a really big spectrum of prices. It depends whether you're smoking indoor or import. There's what they call Cali available. There's carts available. You can get dabs. Pretty much everything's available.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you can pretty much get the hookup that you need. You can feel that same like vibe that you get at home. It sounds like.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
you
It's
can.
it's
Yeah.
it's a global market, and many players at the table these days.
No man, super cool, super cool. Um, so we're talking like prices and all this stuff as far as weed goes, but I mean prices don't mean diddly squat unless you actually like find somebody who's willing to sell it to you. Like so as far as like people that are that like where how people are going about getting like their weed. Like I was reading some stuff about like like taxi drivers, but they might be trying to like scam you like with the police, like and that like hooking up with expats like might be like a good route, or like I mean how if you're trying to let's say if you're trying to get your hands on some like land race, like if you're like like weed nerding up like myself, and you're just like I want Cambodian, I want Laotian, and I want Vietnamese. Who would you be talking to if like you wanted it to actually happen and not get
Mm.
robbed? And then also like for those people that really want that indoor, because I could imagine somebody being really frustrated going around the city all day trying to having people trying to hand them sticks and seeds, be like, damn it, I know there's indoor here somewhere.
Right, right, right.
So,
Well, it sounds like you're talking about tourists because obviously locals are going to know where to hook up.
yes,
It's going to
yes, yeah,
be
yeah.
from your boy, Yeah, so a tourist landing into Hanoi probably is going to end up in the old quarter in the historical city center, and you're going to have touts on motorbikes that are going to be offering you the sticks and seats. Hey, Josh, do you remember that dude we saw? Was it yesterday? And he just waved like a baggie in our faces, but it was just a baggie. There was nothing in it, and
Yes, yes.
it was just plastic. We're like, what is this? There's a lot of scams. You need to be careful. In general, in Southeast Asia, being connected to the police or the military is pretty important. So anybody who's doing any kind of illegal activity is going to be doing so really under the auspices and protection of somebody who's in the police, typically a family member or a distant relative. Everyone's got like an uncle who's a cop who sort of sorts out any problems that might arise. And so, given the tight connection between the sellers and the authorities in a lot of these cases, particularly in the tourist areas where I'm not going to describe it as sanctioned, but I mean, you'd be insane to think that the cops didn't know what was going on. There's not only the risk of getting ripped off, of being sold, like back in the day, some oregano or something. It's not actually going to be oregano, but just not even weed, just some sticks and leaves. And so, we're all, maybe I was here 3-4 years ago, and you're looking for reggae bars and Rasta bars. It seems like in the last 3 years the scene has changed somewhat as far as the city center goes. We didn't find any of the old places that we used to frequent, and so we had to go a little bit outside of the city center into a more sort of local neighborhood, looking for reggae music. Yeah, let's say looking for reggae music. And there, you're much more likely to find sort of roots stoners who are going to put you in contact with somebody that can get you some decent landrace, or you're going to be
just following
that barbershop, Josh. Yeah, it's always like that. But in our quest to sort of figure out what's available, we got recommended several times barbershops, which are run by sort of a young generation, to my eye, very middle class. Vietnamese kids who have this. For me, it was a very sort of a Korean fashion aesthetic, in terms of the hair, the music, and everything else. And they're like, sit down, play some FIFA, the soccer game, get a haircut, and we'll bring you some dro. Okay, fair enough.
That sounds so lit that I am all the way here for that. Hey, can we get some of these barbershops here in the States? I'm definitely here for the culture. I mean, hell. Oh, okay. So we got Ryan. He's hopping on. We're gonna see if this works. What up, Brad? Reverb.
Let's see. How's that looking there? All right, cool. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Yes.
Well, just mute yourself.
All right.
Yeah, but obviously you hopped on because you had something you wanted to ask or say. So unmute yourself and then do that.
Just letting you guys know there's a little bit going on in the chat, but yeah, I mean, just I'd love to hear more about what you guys are doing in Vietnam and Laos and all that stuff as the collective, for sure. Like, obviously, you get to find out where the weed is at and who the cool people are and who's got the hookup, because you're going in and doing what you do, right?
Yeah, dude. So next steps is heading to the northwest. We're going to go make some connections with some Hmong people in the northwest of Vietnam, and look to check out the fields where it's predominantly hemp growing, and not so much drug type cultivars, more hemp growing, and yeah, look to source some of the genetic from there. Look to make the connections with the farmers to see how they're utilizing the plant, to see what they're making, more so making than smoking. And following that, then we would hop the border into Laos, where you're going to find more of the drug type cultivars, more of the Sensimilia, and we take that on board. We see what the smoke's like there. We see how the farmers are growing it. We see what we can collect and how we can support them in these regions. So it's moving pretty soon. We've been in Hanoi for about a week, 10 days now, getting to know the scene. But we're keen to be spreading our wings a bit and making some connections in the northwest as we go forward.
That's where it's all at. I mean, like Josh mentioned, we've got the Hmong, who sort of are the most visible in terms of growing hemp in an approved fashion, government approved fashion in the northwest, particularly in the regions of Sapa and Hajiang, which are big tourist spots. And so that's kind of the first stops, where we're looking to get some hemp land races on the go and see what else is available. I mean, it's always a matter of time and budget. If If we had the budget, we'd be going much further into the countryside, and if we had the time, we'd be spending more time there, looking for different things. But ultimately, we're kind of always having to compromise in terms of trying to get the most bang for our buck as far as keeping the people who support us happy. And that generally keeps us sort of moving quite fast from place to place in the search for the next thing that they want. It's like once we hook them up with some sick Cambodians, they're like, well, where's the Laotians? And once that's done, it's like, well, it's always the next one. And so, yeah, we're heading into Laos where, yeah, like as Josh said, it's much more high THC varietals, and we'll be staying there for a little bit longer, probably until January, February time.
Oh, man, I'm gonna be there for a hot minute.
How is in most of those areas? How is the consumption? Is it typically in flower? Do they make some form of hashish? How is it preserved because of the high humidity, all that?
I would describe a Southeast Asian cure. Essentially, electricity is pretty much in most villages that have road access. But until, let's say, the mid 60s or so, and even much later in a lot of places, even now, there is no electricity. So growing in what generally could be described, like I said earlier, there is not just jungle, but I'm just going to sort of, for the sake of generalizing, describe it as a typically quite hot and humid environment. We just don't have the same capabilities for processing hash, for a start, but also for flower. And so we're seeing the compression curing method either in small format using whatever receptacles are on hand. Obviously in Thailand, that's known as the Thai sticks, all the way through to the brick. A lot of the Lao in particular, the Lao weed in Vietnam will be consumed in brick format. And the Cambodian typically is going to be loose, unpressed flowers. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about traditional consumption, absolutely no extracts whatsoever, no hashish, just pure flower, ranging on a spectrum of sort of like, and it's also because of the inherent structure of the plant itself being much more loose. The increased surface area means that the trichomes, they dry out and desiccate so much faster, and obviously the plant material itself. And so everybody likes smoking dense buds all over the world. And so the solution here is not, to breathe density into the plant, but rather than to take a bunch of loose nugs, press them together, and cure them as a whole, as a single mass. And then when you're breaking it apart, you have that density and you have that preservation of the trichomes in the inner core of the mass. I can see you're look intrigued by that.
I am very intrigued because not very often do I hear methods of post processing that are totally foreign to me, and I feel like I'm exposing my ignorance right now, like pretty hard. Like, okay, so I need you to talk a little bit about pressure curing and what exactly this process is, and like, yeah, like.
Well, like I said, everybody wants to smoke dense weed. It's not a. No matter where you are, if your weed is really loose and airy, it'll dry out very fast. And when you put it in a joint or a bong, it'll taste like crap. So instead of breathing density into the plant, which is not suited to a plant evolved this way loose because of the local climatic pressures, they're looking to add density to the final product by pressing flowers together. And so that can be, just a matter of just, a few buds together wrapped in some cling film sold as is, and it's just easy to pick them apart. Or it can be all the way through to, and I'm sure you guys experienced this in America, to the brickweed, which is typically pressed using a garbage compactor, and everything in between. And so the theory behind it is, of course, to add density, as I pointed out, but it's a little bit more than that. It's also about reducing the surface area that's exposed to oxygen. in order to slow down that drying process.
Wow.
And when you do have that pressure, a lot of the trichome heads are going to burst. So when you have this sort of like bushweed, which there is a lot of trichomes, but there's also a lot of sticks. There's also a lot of leaves which are so thin that it's almost impossible to trim them out. You're going to see a homogenization of the total cannabinoids within the mass. So let's say you've got, X amount of cannabinoids. Instead of all being sort of, on the callus, in the main sort of like on the tops and stuff, you're going to take the entire, branches and press them all together. And over time, as I said, the trichome heads will burst, and so the cannabinoids will essentially seep throughout the
Yeah.
mass, and so they'll equalize. So you're going to have like an averaging out of the cannabinoids throughout the volume, and that means that you can actually start to consume the leaves and the stems and everything else, which people
Oh
do.
my gosh, my
Just
head is
waste
exploding.
everything.
Oh, my head is exploding. Like, oh my gosh. Like, okay, this is crazy. This is crazy. I like it's this is
This
this is
is
the
what I'm
opposite end of the
talking about,
experiment.
man. This is why the next level Ganjier needs to travel with people like the Zomia Collective, with people like the people that Kev went to Pakistan with, so that they can see these other methods that just don't fucking exist in America or the West, whatever you want to call it. They're very, very dependent to process how the material is because of the environment and where they live.
Joe, okay, so here's my thing. Most people, I think, can relate to brickweed. In fact, most people I know people who like that they thought they didn't even know what a cannabis flower looked like until the California exploded with legalization, and Instagram like got flooded with flowers, and they're just like, what the hell is that? And it's like, that's weed. Like, oh shit, that's what weed looks like. I like because I mean, when we really see it, and it's like pressed brick, and ever since the world that the mainstream America was exposed to what an actual cannabis flower looks like. At least mainstream cannabis smokers like of America, they like we immediately just like ignored and just kind of just threw away the concept of brickweed as just like. Honestly, I think maybe we even just all came up with our own assumptions for why brickweed's brickweed. It's like, oh yeah, they've just made it into a brick because it was easier for transportation, like easier for smuggling,
I mean,
whatever,
sure,
whatever.
but
But actually put compressing the entire thing into a brick for the sake of curing, like to create this like homogeneous like new product.
yeah. And so the big problem is that people who consume brickweed typically are a little bit poor. Otherwise, they'd be, getting some unpressed flowers, as is sort of the vogue today. And so there's a huge misconception, and I think a lot of people have a very, very flawed perception of what brickweed is. Essentially, the smaller volume Thai sticks are going to dry out faster. They're also going to be higher quality, and you can buy them in smaller bits, and they'll retain their freshness. If you are buying dime bags of brick, they're going to have a huge kilo. They're going to shave off a little slab and give it to you, and it dries out like that. It's gone. Tastes like
Yep.
nothing. If I'm not gonna tell on myself too much, but if one were to be moving weight and seeing, you know, dozens of pounds on a daily basis, you're gonna see some really insanely good brickweed. Because the cannabis is just straight up really good here. And so when you have that larger volume, you're going to have a much slower. I'm going to call it a fermentation, but it isn't. It really just is not a fermentation. But people can easily relate to it as a
Yeah.
sort of fermentation type process. Um, you're going to see a much slower sort of fermentation, and you're going to see much more freshness. So I remember, especially Lao bricks coming into Thailand. A lot of the foreigners in particular are going to be like, oh, that's crap. Don't even bother. But I'm getting them straight from the big boys, and when it comes through, some of it is crap, but enough of it is truly excellent as far as being moist, sticky, terpy, and insanely potent. But you only see that if you're buying pounds. If you're buying little bits, by the time it gets to you, it's totally dry. And so I think a lot of people, yeah, have this flawed perception because typically brick is, I mean, not many people are buying pounds of
Yeah.
bricks and consuming it fast enough that it stays fresh. And so that's definitely more mafia. And absolutely, the brick shape came from ease of transportation more than anything else. Because traditionally, the compression curing is done by hand, by, for example, excuse me, selecting just the tops of the plants, just the mids, just the popcorn, and pressing those separately. And those will be pressed by hand, where they're just essentially squeezing the buds up, tying it up with string to keep it its shape, and then going all the way up into larger receptacles, the most traditional of which will be, again, bamboo. And so you're going to take your weed and pack it in a tube of bamboo, take a smaller piece of bamboo and just ram it down. And then you're going to leave it in the bamboo with a little plug on top, maybe bury it underground or whatever, and come back to it a year later. You split the bamboo tube in half, and then you've got this little cylinder of compression cured weed, which typically is very high quality.
Oh, dude. Okay, what you described with the like the twine and the stick, I think most people, like at least like myself, like I think that's like the mainstream image of like what we would call a tie stick. Like it's like, oh yeah, that's a tie
Yeah.
stick. That's one form of like compression current. This bamboo thing, like I want to try this. I mean, that's you know, the other thing that's kind of crazy is that like it also kind of shows um like different types of cultures, and like because I feel like whenever you we have neighboring cultures, we have instances where things get kind of lost in translation, and they have like what I'm even going to call right now like the barbarian complex, like, oh, I don't understand what it is you're doing, it must be because you're uncivilized, like and like one of the things is like, for example, with like the advent of like a more of a craft weed in the United States, where you have flower that's not being compressed and this other stuff that's happening, smoking stems is not a good idea. Like it just like it was just it's garbage. Like I mean, with like it just it tastes so horrible. And one of the things that you end up having, especially with like newly legalized states like Virginia, have lots of people who have like are just like crossing boundaries in terms of or borders in terms of like their social groups to make these new cannabis groups. And one of the things I saw are like people like, you know, judging each other like, oh, like you're just like you're grinding it all up and just like putting it all in the bowl. Like, hey, you don't pick out the stems. What's wrong with you? Like that's like it's like that's gross. That's like harsh. You need to be separating and this and that, and like seeing those kind of judgments when in actuality, like what you just said, that's so mind blowing. Like with brickweed, with the homogenizing, that like it actually transforms the entire product, leaves, stems, and all. Like after, like it, so is this like most typically you have stuff that's going to be aged for like a year, like when it's pressed, like pressed and pressed.
Man, it takes a while to make it from the farm to Hanoi, you know. They you know, they're not super yeah, the logistics are complicated, man, especially given the illegality. So I'd say no one's really smoking, you know, fresh weed.
Your
Been aged for a little while.
to
Yeah,
its benefit, or
for
would you
sure.
say to its like to its deficit? Because I mean, for me, like
Mm,
I'm all about curing cannabis. Like I have cannabis I've been
mm,
curing for over a year, and it's wonderful.
right,
Like, so
right.
hearing
Of
that it's
course, of
like that, it's like
course.
this stuff is like stored. Like I mean, storing it underground for a year, and this like this other stuff.
Well, again, people on top moving weight are gonna see really
Yeah,
high quality fresh stuff. I mean, not fresh, but like aged, but you know, well aged. By the time it gets to the beach bar and you buy that little, you know, $5 pinner from the bar lady, it's not the best. And that's what the sort of waves of tourists come in and, you know, they leave, they write blogs, they talk on YouTube or whatever, and they give this false impression of what they see because they're not, you know, high enough up the structure to actually be able to get the the, the quality that I'm describing.
that could be a good and stabilizing factor, something to because like, I always feel like there's the point of this project that I'm doing is to like, you know, learn about other cultures, but there's I mean there's lots to be shared, and wonder if there are like some practices of storage like that have been developed in like Western culture that might like help preserve some of that, because like, you know, taking all that time to make that quality, it's like it's almost like a travesty that for it to lose that quality, you know.
Agreed, agreed. Well, yeah, well, people here are, it's not backwards or anything, have access to vacuum sealers and such, and, if people have, then they use them for sure. And so especially the big bricks, they're coming vacuum sealed these days. Historically, there was the thread that was being used to distinguish between the different qualities of the tie sticks, for example, later with the Buddha sticks. And with the brick, it's the same thing. It's the color of the foil on the outside. So, like, people value gold foil, blue foil, red foil, etc. And so it's a big brick sandwiched in foil. And then it's not actually like foil. It's like a silvery, metallic kind of material. And then vacuum seals around that.
Oh man, yeah, I'm not gonna front. I
But
think
ultimately, man, I would say give it a go yourself, dude. With something you got left,
Yeah,
something you're gonna wash rather than wash it. Have some compression cured. See how it goes.
exactly.
Get
Exactly.
out
uh,
of it.
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I do. I want to try this because I mean, like we don't have a ton of bamboo forest, but just in my neighborhood, one of the neighbors got like a thick old, like their whole backyard is totally like replaced in bamboo. I want to try this now. I don't want to try to do some.
But then you need to experiment with different species of bamboo because not all bamboo is equal.
Ooh,
Different curing practices for the bamboo itself, and then how you treat the inside. Are you steaming the tubes first in order to get rid of the bacteria? Or are you doing nothing at all? One farmer we know coats the insides with wild honey that he collects himself in the forest, and obviously that must have a pretty significant impact on the final product. One thing which I keep having it pop into my head and back out. I just want to point out it's not just the homogenization of the cannabinoids throughout the mass. It's also a case of breaking down the cell walls. So it's the application of mechanical force plus temperatures that are elevated plus time. So pretty similar to what Frenchie was describing in terms of aging hashish.
so it's
And so
like
obviously breaking down the cell walls means that the chlorophyll degrades that much faster, and you end up with a product which is very, very, very smooth.
man, so you're like basically creating like the not. Oh, I'm gonna stick my foot in my mouth, but no, I'm gonna do it. Not to be rude, but like a really really low grade hash brick. Essentially, it sounds like that's what
Uh,
you're hearing. I mean, in terms of
I,
when I say low grade, as
yeah,
in
I can see, yeah, I can see what you're saying. I can see what you're saying. Yeah,
It's still flour, but what's happening is you're having all the terpenes, which are solvents. You're having the cannabinoids, which create a new matrix because they
yeah.
are
Hmm.
chemically reacting with the plant material itself. By homogenizing through the different cell structures and breaking them down in their own unique ways, you're getting a different product entirely. So yes, it is like aging hashish and pressing the matrix with the wax cuticle and all that, but it is entirely different because it's not hash at all. It's still very much a flower herbal product. It's just what oils that the plant has made has now been seeped through all the plant material rather than left in the trichome head. So it ages differently. It tastes different. It's going to have a different effect. All that.
And I
wow.
just want to point out that with the really narrow drug leaf type cultivars, it is, let's just call it functionally impossible to properly trim it. There's just so much volume of leaf that it makes no sense from a manpower perspective to sit there and trim. And so homogenizing the cannabinoids throughout that mass, again, it allows you to recuperate more smoking material at the end of the day, though of course it'll be a sort of a lower total per hit of cannabinoids, because we're sort of leaching cannabinoids from the bracts and callus into leaf material and stems and everything else.
Yeah, okay, man. Yeah, that is so dope. That is so freaking dope. Like this pressure curing, oh my gosh, because now I'm thinking like, well, like what if like you took like flour and like and trimmed it and then like pressure cured it, so there was like still like a minimum amount of like of plant material, like oh my gosh, and this
So good. And
right.
that's what the best tie sticks were. properly manicured, or at least better than a lot of the stuff we see these days. It was artisanal production back in the day, and it would take, first of all, quite a while to come from the farm to the coast. And then from the coast, it takes another little while to get to the mothership. The mothership being the large ocean going ship, which will cross the Pacific to the States and bring the product there. And so, if you've ever heard of a whiskey or wine or spirits being cured, being cured rather, being aged in the holds of boats, there's even today certain whiskeys that are specifically sailed around the world because the changes in atmospheric pressure, the changes in the temperature and the environment have a significant effect on the volume of liquid. It's the same thing with cannabis. And so, weed in a big bale in the hold of a boat across the Pacific gets pretty hot, and it stays pretty consistently hot until you reach, the northern reaches. And so, yeah, it's mechanical pressure plus time plus heat, which may have led to the magic of the Southeast Asian weed found in America from the 60s onwards. And it's very hard to find similar quality here today. And I think a large part of that is due to the time to market and the climatic conditions on the way, which basically cannot be replicated.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's difficult to replicate the situation, especially with all the present situations for the illegalities and
as well as the pressure from the drug war and the eradication of a lot of genetic material.
yeah.
Which I'd like to point out that for example, after the genocide in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge were ousted
Yeah.
from power, and the UN transitional government came in. One of the first stipulations that they made for access to aid for Cambodia was cut down your weed fields.
Oh, I've read about that shit. Yeah. Such,
So it's like, you guys want development money after we fucked up your country? Cut down your weed.
man, I swear it's a conspiracy. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to veer into that, but certainly seems like it from my perspective. I mean, for me, I would like to point out that you cannot sit and smoke Southeast Asian cannabis and sit there and play video games or eat, Doritos, whatever. It lights a fire under your ass. It makes you, as Josh said, a little bit paranoid sometimes, a little bit of anxiety, and that comes from sitting around and not being active. This was cannabis that was bred for work, for cutting appetite, for getting out there and doing stuff. And so, in that sense, during this time period that we're describing, we see, I mean, the sort of it's the end of the left, of the revolutionary left.
Yeah.
A lot of student groups who smoke weed for the first time, and they're like, wait a minute, because it makes you think, and you think like, my life sucks, and I'm not going to sit there and take it. I'm going to go out in the streets and I'm going to do something about it. I might even smoke a joint of sativa and take down the government. And according to some people, I mean, according to some people, Sam the Skunk Man mentioned this to me, a couple of other dudes, that for them, they see it as a conspiracy. The CIA will have realized that Afghani cannabis, what we describe as indica typically, due to the fact that it's cultivated in this sort of highly domesticated, controlled environment with sort of very few males and a very severe winter coming at the end of a short growing season, you see this homogenization or this standardization of the ripening times, with everything ripening very uniformly and completely to the amber trichomes, which give this narcotic sedative effect. And so this sort of shorter flowering time, which is obviously one of the main demands of the commercial growers and market these days, will have rendered our weed less threatening to the establishment. And if that's why they made it illegal, eradicated the sativa, and they're like, yo, we'll give you weed, but it'll be Afghani because then you're not going to take down the government.
Joe, that's like that. What is one of the biggest complaints in any and every market that like I have that I have like interacted with is that there are way too many indicas and not enough sativas. and
For
make
sure.
every excuse under the sun, but like never one that like really makes any sense.
But the
Except,
thing is that so the Cambodian, for
maybe
example,
one makes some.
28. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you, but for
No,
example,
no,
the
no, go
Cambodian
ahead.
28-week flowering, with police pressure, with poor farmers who need to make some bucks, they're not letting that go 28 weeks, or rarely. If you did, you'd have amber trikes and a narcotic effect. But they're cutting that bad boy at 24 weeks, 20 weeks, 18, and you got pure, clear tricks. You're ending up with, this, paranoid, soaring high that makes you think, that makes you question. Like a little fire under your ass. And so yeah, it's definitely the flowering time. And for me, it's the biggest travesty that the cannabis industry is moving towards these shorter flowering times. I mean, even from the point of view of the farmer as an artist, in order to be able to express your soul, your passion as a farmer, you need that longer flowering time so that you have more room to choose that point of ripeness, that balance of all the variables which defines you as a farmer and your garden as a growing region. When it's condensed down to 8 weeks, you got no room to express yourself.
Oh man, that is very like, eloquently put. I think Swami would wholeheartedly agree with your opinion on that matter. I mean, I certainly do. That the longer flowering period, and that's I think the movement. It's crazy to think that I would be really like concerned, like that's where cannabis needs to be going. It's like
Well, look at any other fruit or crop. I mean, like, my background is as a sommelier. I trained as a sommelier before moving into the cannabis industry. And short flowering varietals, especially from hot climates with this more intense sunlight and UVs, etc. This is the worst quality, and really, all of the best wines come from the slowest growing, longest ripening varietals, and it's a gamble for the farmers. I get the whole economic constraints of longer varietals. So, for example, in Piemonte in Italy, they're growing 4 different varieties, maybe 5. And the first one, Dolcetto, it ripens super quickly and it's very easy to produce. And because of that, it's consistent. You're never really going to run into bad weather at the end of the season. So you're guaranteed to get a Dolcetto crop every year, which provides the base of your economy. Then we move on to the Barbera being a slightly lower or longer ripening varietal, which because of the longer times, you might have some bad weather. And so if you can make some great Barbera, you will. And then the Nebbiolo, which is harvested in October. And Nebbiolo means the one who loves the fox in the local dialect. And it is typically harvested in pretty, they're cutting it fine. Sometimes you can't pull off a good Nebbiolo. And I feel like it's kind of strange when we are experienced with other crops, looking at the cannabis industry and seeing everybody like, no, 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 we couldn't possibly grow long flowering varieties. We need to get that money. We need to get that bread. And that happens in 8 weeks. I mean, I get it, but it's extremely short-sighted, and it's definitely not giving the best quality of product for the consumer. It's a concern that the farmers have for their bottom line, which of course makes sense. But it's not the route for high quality production.
yeah, right. No, not at all.
Not at all.
No, that's a big time complexity in the cannabis industry and the commercialization of it, because they literally count how many crops per year can I get in. That's it. It's how many harvests per year and how many pounds of biomass per harvest, and maximize that, and I'll build the stores to sell it, because the demand is so high and people don't realize that there is something else out there. Even just stretching it to a 10-week varietal or a 12-week varietal or a 14-week varietal, you get a huge range on a far end of the spectrum of complexity and diversity away from these 7 and 8 week cultivars. And I've seen it. I do it for a living. And that's why I really have a passion with these land races and stuff like that, because it's being completely phased out of existence as far as I'm seeing it in any sort of commercial situation. There's a few farmers in the States that can pull off a 12-week varietal, but they're few and far between. It's even hard for me down south in Arizona. So it's really coming to the point to where if we expect these things to stick around, they have to stick around in the places where they exist, because certain things cannot be grown all over the world. And you can't take something that takes 24 weeks and put it under electric lighting in a commercial environment, or even really for a home grower, that's difficult to do. It's extremely cost inefficient and time sensitive, and a lot of care has to go in to preserve the quality of the plant for that long. Whereas in its native environment, that's just what the fuck it does. So let it be what it is where it is, and preserve it where it is. And so get the attention on the farmers that are doing it, get the attention on the people and the culture that are doing it now, so that they can be preserved in a good way and they're not corrupted by the drug war.
So we're talking like establishing appellations, and also improving storage, so that we can properly have it be grown there, but then being able to like actually make it to where like people can consume it, and whatnot, to get it in that form, and the value of that's going to skyrocket.
And keeping them from getting the land in the shape it is from conventional agriculture. I mean, it's already happening in certain areas that we would call land race. I experienced it with Josh and Brendan in India. Some of the farmers think that it's going to be more cost effective to go buy a fertilizer input and dump it on their ground, but they really don't understand it to its full complexity, and it's not healthy for the soil or the environment or what happens downstream or for the end product. So it's educating without trying to change and getting them to adapt to the way the rest of the world is. It's preserve the way that you know how to do it and have done it without the influence from the outside world.
Ryan, man, I just got to say, I'm so stoked to hear you say this, because this is the total ethos of what we're trying to do, man. You just absolutely nailed it there for us. So on my behalf, on Brendan's behalf, on Zomia's behalf, thank you so much, man. Thanks for that.
You guys taught me a lot in India, man. That trip means a whole fucking lot to me. A whole fucking lot. I miss it.
Bad dude.
Man, I want to fucking be there again. I want to be all over the place with you guys. I'm trying to figure out how to make it happen. If that just means other people get to go do it, then that's fucking more than enough, because it was beautiful. It was amazing to see, and I want to see more people do it. It was fucking awesome. And you guys were incredible, and you taught me a lot. And like, I had my own notions going in, and a lot of them aligned, and it was beautiful to see it come together. But you guys taught me a lot and made me realize a whole lot. There's no way to change it. We shouldn't change it, and we can't try that hard to change it. We need to try harder to just let it be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, on that note, very important to a point I wanted to mention is that the Zomia Collective, the Brendan and Josh, and like some others, they are the ones who organized the expedition to India, to go to Himachal Pradesh and the Milana Valley, and just like that entire experience. So like very 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 cool. So I'm curious, because this whole Vietnam like excursion, like do you guys try to put together like things, or actually no, wait, let me back up. Like, from my understanding, this recent trip was like the first of its kind, or like fairly like new, was like fairly early in the process. Is India, like, is that where you're looking to do like most of the trips, like, at this point? Or are you looking to try and like organize trips to other places, like, and also like what would be the next thing that you guys are trying to plan?
Well, we'd love to take people everywhere, but we can only be in one growing region for harvests at a time. And as far as that goes, we do have to pick and choose to go to the places where we can protect the people who come with us from the law, from physical danger, etc. And as far as that goes, India was easily the most obvious choice.
Right.
I mean, Ryan's seen it now, so he can tell you why. But I hope you felt safe when you were there with us. But we want to be able to take. Basically, we've been trying to get genetics into the hand of the right people, And some of these people have been dropping, fairly significant sums of money. And it's like, well, if you're going to drop a couple grand on seeds, come out to Southeast Asia or Thailand, and I'll take you to some of the biggest fields, most biodiverse fields, and you can hunt yourself from the fields. I mean, that seems to be a more obvious choice, and for us, it represents a long-term pivot away from selling genetics and to putting the value in the inherent beauty of the field itself as an attraction for ecotourism, and for guided pheno hunting and hash making within those fields, essentially educational projects, putting the value in the field itself, not on what the field can produce, essentially. And so in order to get there, yeah, we'd love to be able to connect more breeders, more home growers, with traditional farmers, so that we can forge those ties, create links in the community from all sides of the world. But yeah, I mean, everybody wants to go there and pheno hunt primarily. And so yeah, we'd like to do more tours. India is is definitely the easiest, and Ryan saw, we barely scratched the surface. We were there 2 weeks. We only covered one tiny little valley inside an entire mountain range filled with weed, basically from Iran all the way to where we are now in Vietnam. It's the same mountains, it's the Himalayas, and there's weed all up in those mountains. Yeah. So we'd love to take you to Thailand. We'd love to take you to India. Those are the easiest two. Me and Josh were talking about Vietnam. What would that look like? And we could easily do it. However, there's a lot less interest in, come to the city and witness a totally degraded growing region, see a lot of hydro that's not as good as what you have back home, and join us to some hemp fields in a tourist region. It's still great. I mean, I'm not selling it when I say it like that, but that's kind of what it is. In India, it's much more like, look, the fields are pristine. We'll take you right to them. You're not going to see any drill. You're not going to see any fucking glass bongs. You're going to be with the locals, doing it the local way. And so that's why we started off there, was because it was the most sort of impactful. When we go there, it's pretty clear what we're all about. Whereas in Southeast Asia, we're more reliant on motorbikes for transportation. And this is something I realized when Ryan came out. I guess I've been here for most of my adult life now, and I've been totally desensitized to stuff like crossing the street in Delhi or driving a bike on a mountain road. For me, it's just daily activities, but it can be a little bit overwhelming for people who have never experienced that before. And so, yeah, India, despite it being a really sort of uncomfortable and hectic place, still offers us what we need in that regards. Whereas, like, for example, I'd love to take people on the old smugglers' trails through the Cardamom Mountains in Cambodia. So big fields up in the rice-growing areas to the north of the mountains, and then little trails that cut through one of the biggest remaining patches of highland tropical rainforest in Southeast Asia. A week and a half without seeing another soul, surrounded by jungle on an old smuggler's trail. That sounds like I really would love to take people to do that. But it's definitely much more niche than come to Milana and smoke cream with us. A lot of people know what Milana is, and there's already interest there. So yeah, that's why we started there. But of course, the more interest we get, and the more manpower we can, hire essentially, and to get to work with us, the more places we can cover, and the more we can do this. And when we'd love to, because ultimately there's a timeline on how long we can sell seeds, given that every seed we sell is then taken by someone else, bred into something else, rarely attributed to us or the farmers. You know what I mean? So there's only so much we can do that until it sort of slips through our fingers. And so a big part of what we want to do is establish the collective as a repository of knowledge, of education, so that the fingers eventually point back to the farmer. It's like, okay, cool, you bred with some legit Thailand races, an incredible strain that won the Cannabis Cup. Somebody wants to know more about it. Well, the information's there. And when you Google it, the first people to ever write that name down on paper was us. Maybe some books in the future, that kind of thing. So yeah, we're trying to transition more towards educational, like I said, putting value in the fields themselves as a beautiful place to be and to hunt seeds yourself, a place to come and learn, to engage and immerse in traditional cannabis culture, rather than purely sort of selling a product. Which again, that puts stress on the farmer to try to make their operation more efficient so they can produce more seeds. And in that sense, they change things and modernize. So yeah, we'd love to do more expeditions. We'd love to take whoever wants to come with us to some of the most crazy, radical, fun places to smoke weed on the planet. It's really just up to you guys to come because we're here waiting for you.
Yeah, yeah,
If your only relationship to the plant is growing at home or in a tent or even in your backyard or in a commercial setting, um, it's fucking life changing to be able to walk through a natural cannabis field and see the plants just growing natural as they are. It's really really beautiful and it's something else to experience. It's
Mm.
definitely worth it, 100% worth it. And yes, Brendan, I felt 100% safe the whole time we were in India. I never felt unsafe the whole time. Sure, it's
Good.
different. It's different than the what I'm used to, but you just absorb the culture and take it all in, and it's fucking awesome. And the people were beautiful and as generous as could be.
Shout out to Jeffrey. I think he's in the chat, and he was the one who put us in contact with Ryan. And so thanks, man. We probably
oh
this wouldn't have gone off the ground if we hadn't talked about it and got in contact a couple of years ago, man. So stoked to have met you. Keep doing what you're doing, and hope to see you next year, buddy. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, speaking of, let's see. I can let's see, pull up a chat overlay here. Yeah, so we got some stuff in the chat. Oh, it's not okay. I guess it only comes up live. But yeah, he said much love. Jeff is he said next year it is on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so we also got we got Kevin that was in the chat. Kevin Jodry, what's up from Humboldt?
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually a comment that Jeff made a little bit earlier, which I think I can get behind. I think I can get behind. He says that craft growers don't really mind long flowering times, like GMO, super popular. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good point. GMO does go like, and I feel like with those, and the point is he's making is that like, it's going to come down to the craft growers to like, yeah, keep this type of stuff alive, but like as soon as we move away from landrace, like we start looking at genetic epigenetic deviations, right?
Yes, 100%. No matter what seed or pheno you hunt or whatever, when you grow it in your environment, in your conditions, with your grow methods, it's going to change. Especially if you keep it in a clonal form. It's going to adapt to your to your weather patterns, and it's going to adapt to your barometric pressure. All that stuff is different depending on where you live, and it doesn't matter if you're in a tent or a room or whatever. But doesn't mean it can't be good. Doesn't mean it won't adapt in a positive way.
Sure, sure. I like to point to tea in this regards. It's the most consumed beverage on Earth after water, and there's very few distinct growing regions. And people keep trying to grow tea elsewhere, but it's just why why do we need to? I mean, I get it's closer to the market, and of course, the U.S. is such a major market, but cannabis comes from Asia. We just don't have
Yeah,
the scale to be able to replicate it, even if we wanted to. I mean. Um, I'm really bothered about. I quote this all the time, but I haven't been able to find the study. It was Sam the Skunk Man told me 2,000 males, 2,000 females. That's the minimum viable population to have every expression of every gene carry on from one generation to the next. And so, people love to talk about preservation in the U.S., but I'm not seeing any. If your gene pool is dwindling every single year without even making any selections, then that's not preservation. I mean, it's great. It's better than nothing, but it's nowhere near enough. And it's only out here in Asia where the plant is native that we can really have that scale, and that we can really see the plant express the terroir. And as far as appellation goes, you maybe hear a little bit of the rivalry between French and American winemakers, and of course we all have this perception of French people being very arrogant. I think that that's true, actually. I'm Basque, by the way, so I'm like just French enough to be able to say that, and I'm not French enough that I don't, hurt my own feelings by saying that. And but yeah, basically it's a matter of terroir. And when you look at a village which was, the site was selected due to its proximity to a river, to fields, etc., it's an organic process that happens. Whereas in the New World growing regions, we analyze soil and we say, bam, this varietal goes here. It's all well and good. I mean, from a chemical point of view, pretty much all the same stuff is there, but it doesn't express history. It doesn't express culture. And on top of that, we have all this bureaucracy in America, in the UK, in Spain. For example, when it comes to wine, you have to have sterilized surfaces, which means that you don't have a microbiome in your winery that can support spontaneous fermentations. And so instead, you have to sterilize and kill everything, and then bring in cultured yeasts. And for me, that's not terroir. And I think that's where the arrogance comes from. Is the French academics and winemakers see, continuity of 1,000 years. They see, microbiomes that are shared between farmers in the only pub in the village for generations. And you can't describe American viticultural areas, the appellations that have been created, in the same terms. It's just not the same thing. And as far as cannabis goes, it's the same. It's like, no, you can define Humboldt as a region all you want, and I know that it has its peculiarities, but cannabis is not indigenous to Humboldt, so there's no varietal that evolved there to express the soil. Simply put. Whereas in Asia, that's what we have. We have, if you've been there and you know what it smells like in that forest, and when you smell that weed, when you smoke that weed, it takes you back to the forest. So not only do you have to have been there to experience it, but there has to be that interplay between the varietal and its environment for long enough for it to be able to sort of establish itself as a consistent expression of the terroir. And again, that's something that we're only going to see in Asia, where we have historical, long-standing cannabis plantations.
Yeah, with the way that things are currently regulated, I could easily see that whole process being kind of arrested a little bit, because just like you said, like with the whole like sterilized surfaces with like wine and whatnot, that like, well, we're at this point where I remember something Swami was telling me about with like harvesting plants that once upon a time, of course, top shelf, like mid and like bottom, like, was also referring to how they harvested the plant. Like we harvested like progressively throughout the season because it's not all maturing at the same rate and you're getting different like qualities. But as soon as regulations started like kicking in and how you have to like fill out 1,000,000 documents every time a leaf falls off of your plant or whatever, they're just like, you know what, F it. It's not worth it. We're just going to harvest it all at the same time, and we're just going to kind of try to fit into this box.
Yep.
And once you're fitting into a box, like it's no longer organic growth. It's now like this structured, cultivated like tech growth. Except now we're talking like on a system, which I mean I think is a lot of the frustrations that they're feeling out in Humboldt. Is that like like they're trying to do this like dance between like getting a system to protect them without having the system force them into becoming like an artificial part of the system.
I'll put it this way: at this point, a lot of French winemakers carve their names out by rejecting the appellation rather than doing well within its bounds. The appellation system is fairly restrictive to the creativity of the farmer in a way.
Yeah, hey, we got a couple more comments coming in here. Oh, yeah, Kevin Jodry said Kevin said he wants to go to the jungle too. Yeah, let's
You're
go.
so welcome, Kevin. We're waiting for you, man. We'd love it. Love nothing more for you to come out, for sure.
Yeah, let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, I am I can definitely get down with that. So like yeah, narrowleaf cultivars they're making a comeback in the homegrown market, and something I was thinking with regards to that, with like the exchange of information. You guys remember like the student exchange programs, right? Where you go to like high school somewhere else, that like for the foreign exchange program, that's what it's called. Um, like there've been thoughts like as for the Zomia collective, like as like bringing in some of these like home cultivators from like the Western market, where we could like maybe have like a bit of like maybe like an exchange or something, where like, hey, you come and like stay with like our family for a bit, and like just see how we go about growing, see if there's anything that you may or may not want to pick up from here, and I go and like stay with your family and learn about like how like you guys like do it there, and also like get a feel for like you were saying, appreciating the field for the field and not for the product, like feeling, experiencing the terroir like to such an extent that you can, because as an indoor grower you're trying to replicate the outdoor environment, and like yes, I think it's arrogant to think that I could replicate an environment that I've never experienced. Like I
Yeah.
like it like, and I feel like there's got to be a way that we can kind of like pull these things together. I mean,
Mm.
hell, I want to be a part of the exchange program.
Well, so it kind of ties in with the expeditions. I mean, ultimately, it's a good start, but it doesn't go both ways because generally speaking, somebody who's responsible for a big plot of land raised cannabis doesn't have the ability to just fuck off and go to the States for a little while. As
Then
great
maybe
as
somebody
that
else.
would be, but yeah, absolutely the other way around. And also, it's like I, and this is gonna sound a little arrogant. I don't see much to learn in the U.S. Of course, there's all this science and all this technical stuff, but it's just not relevant to the daily experience of people growing cannabis out here. They don't need the same scientific knowledge because they have cultural knowledge instead. And so, of course, some of them are going to be, some of them are interested in that scientific knowledge, but there's some constraints in terms of time and money, so for getting them out there. But in the end, what we're trying to do, like I said, in terms of putting the value in the field itself, we'd like to set up what we call research stations. And we're very early doors with this, but the idea is essentially to have a permanent base in each of the traditional growing regions where we can welcome students to come stay for however long they want, a week, 2 weeks, 6 months, immerse themselves in the culture, get to grips with the weather patterns, pick up some soil and sniff it, really get stuck in there. And so we'd really like to get that off the ground, but as always, it's time, money, and everything else. But I hope that we will get there, and I'm pretty confident because people are stoked to do that, and so the first people to take the jump are going to allow us to get that off the ground, and I can feel it coming. Yeah, the
Oh,
interest is rising.
oh, you're muted, Ryan. Oh, my bad. That was me.
Yeah, I said I do got to push back a little bit because there are some small pockets here in America where they're, especially being connected with the Ganjier network, where there's some farmers doing some really cool shit and attempting. You're right, it's not established, it's not 400 to 500 to 1,000 years old, but they're attempting to establish that culture so that in 100 to 200 to 300 years, maybe we will have something like that. So, yeah, no, there are small pockets. Definitely, I agree with you. From a commercial aspect, there's not much that we could teach them that they can take back home and utilize. I mean, it would just be more like a show and tell type thing, more than. But there are some good farmers out here doing some good work. East
Of
Coast, West
course, of
Coast,
course, of
Midwest,
course.
yeah. And I know you didn't mean to exclude anybody for sure, but we got to experience a tiny little taste of that through the Ganjier program, and it's fucking beautiful to see too. So yeah. And then to bring up that aspect of terroir with cannabis, I know you were telling me that one story. I don't remember where it was at, but it was deep in Southeast Asia where you possibly might be able to see a farmer that's got a plant that maybe 5 to 6 years old because of
Oh
the
yeah,
because of the equatorial swing being so narrow.
yeah. So you were talking about harvesting the plant as you go along. Well, there's one dude who we've been buying bales from for a long time now, and eventually got to the point where we were like, dude, sorry, let's take a step back. the demand for this weed was for properly cured in the Western way, and he couldn't pull it off. And it was just really disappointing. The quality of the weed was there, but the post processing was not. And so it got to the point where, like, listen, man, we just when the harvest comes, just give us the fresh stuff. We'll handle the curing. We'll just get it from the farm to the facility as fast as possible. And it just kept coming, and we're like, but how come you have access to freshly harvested cannabis all year round? And he's like, oh, well, it's a limestone karst plateau, which is very, very steep to access. He uses a little ropeway to get up, and he just doesn't want to go up there very often. And there was a period of several years where he just didn't go there. And so he was telling us, well, look, like, I just go up there and I cut down a few branches whenever I need, never a whole plant. And then I bring it down the mountain and I give it to you guys. We're like, okay, well, do you sow seeds on a yearly basis? He's like, no. Like, okay. How old are some of these plants? And he's like, oh, I don't know, like 3-4 years. I'm like, what the fuck? But we haven't seen the fields because it's like one mountain surrounded by rice farming land, and it's a mafia area, a mafia controlled area for in terms of who grows the weed and where it ends up. And any amount of white guys popping up in that village is going to draw some attention, no matter whether we're there for the weed or not. People are going to know that we're there. So there's a few fields that we know of, but we can't see and touch, and unfortunately, some of those may be the most interesting ones. And all we can do is hope that this guy can keep doing things the way he's doing long enough that legalization comes around, and then we can go and properly study what the fuck he's up to, because I have no idea. But I'm not gonna go ahead and say perennial, but that seems to be what he was implying.
Man, or something that's like stuck in like a pocket. Yeah, it's like the mind really boggles at all the possibilities. But yeah, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hopefully one day hear that mystery unravel. I don't know when that'll be. Like, if I ever do get to hear about it, but like Jesus, like, because I firmly believe that cannabis, with all of its different like things, it has this amazing ability to just adapt, that makes me feel like some of the herbs that have been like written about in legend, even possibly like like eternal like life and shit like that, like could in some way end up being connected to some weird like mutation in the cannabis plant. Oh, we got a couple more comments popping up here. Okay, so we got a Kev. He says it'll happen. People are beginning to want to experience the beginnings of our culture.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that was that was in regards to what you guys were talking about earlier. Oh, cool.
Oh,
Next
thanks,
time we'll
Kevin. Appreciate that, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yo, oh boy. So wait, where are we at right now?
One step, like we were talking about, for legalization, so that these farmers are more comfortable to just continue doing what they're doing. I believe, and I think that's why Zomia is so intent on what they're doing, is getting people out there to try to experience it and get it done in a respectful way, to where you're not trying to get them to push more product. You just want to go meet the people. You want to go eat food with them. You want to go pet their dog. You want to go have conversation, and you want to learn. And I think when it's approached that way with that intent, the government's not so much involved. What the government really gives a fuck about is money. They don't want a lot of money flowing in and out, but what they do want is tourism money. Every government wants that. So get the people that want to go there to be respectful and treat it as a mutual education. Because I know that people are interested in Western culture, and they're obviously it's everywhere. So they're totally down to share and talk and have conversation, but just don't go there to compare. Just go there to see it for what it is. Yeah.
Exactly, and like I think that's an easy trap to fall into when you're talking about like cultures. like coming into contact with each other. And I, yeah, just like we're not like we don't need to feel insecure about our own culture, not like, because I feel like that's where a lot of it comes from, like maybe this idea that like we're like judging our own culture, like through trying to judge others, like, or whatever. And granted, I am trying to gain a greater understanding for like our own culture, through looking at other cultures in the world. But we have to remember that yeah, like it's all it's all gravy, baby. But for the sake of this traveling, like what you were saying, um, if for people that are interested in traveling to India, and to doing like an expedition like Ryan did, uh, where can they reach out? Where can they contact you? Um,
You can check out our website, www.zomiacollective.com. We have an expeditions tab, which actually I need to update post India tour to list the ones for next year and to share some of the pictures from this year. Yeah, so you can check it out there. I will say we also have a Patreon program, and that's where our sort of inner circle is. And the inner circle gets priority on everything and discounts on everything, including the tours. So I would suggest people to check that out, www.patreon.com/Zomia. And you can see, we share our most intimate knowledge there. And we have much more time for the Patreons than everybody else. And so they're basically first in line to come hang out with us.
All right, and those are both in the comments section. Um, they're on this timestamp, and they'll also will be in the description. Uh, huh, something went wrong. The Zomia Collective one posted, but the Patreon one didn't. Let me try it again.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to shout that out. That's really it helps a lot. For anybody who's curious, the deal with the Patreon is, we're out here traveling and we release general populations on the web shop, and the equity is shared with the farmers. The Patreon is hand selections made by me, Josh, and other members of the team. So very, very small, limited amounts of pheno hunted varieties that get released twice a year, and a little seed drop specifically for the Patreons. No one else gets that shit. It's just for the Patreons.
Yeah. And I promise you, these guys get up into the hills. We couldn't make it half as far as what these guys do, and they did a couple weeks before we got there, and they just kept continuing on once we left and got home back to our lazy ass jobs. But yeah, no, they really get deep in the thick of it, and they go out and they look for exemplary plants. They're out there looking for structure. They're out there looking for disease and pest resistance. They're looking for fragrance and pungency, as well as resin coverage. So, I mean, they know what the fuck they're doing. Definitely join the Patreon, be a part of the Zomia Collective, because it's worth it.
Thanks, Ryan.
And they're putting in a whole lot of hard work. It's not easy doing what they do all the time. And they're meeting
in Crocs as well.
Dude, the whole time we were in the Himalayas, this fool Brendan was in Crocs the whole time. These dudes are more legit than I could ever even say. Like, it's not a joke. They get out in the hills, they get dirty, and they go see the girls, and they go find the good ones. And they're establishing really good relationships with amazing people that we had no worries. Like I said, our safety, our comfort, our bellies, we were all taken care of the whole time. And the hash as well was. Thank you.
I think our group this year smoked more cream than anyone else in the valley. We were close to a pound between, like, what, 5 of us over 2 weeks. And a lot of the super cream, such tiny limited amounts get made, especially the age stuff. Like no one really does head stash. So yeah, we did do the work to try and make sure that these guys could have the best experience as far as being able to smoke the top of the top, the head stash of what I consider and what Josh considers to be the best farmers in the region.
Hell yeah.
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 When we were planning it
Sounds
out, we're like, how much you guys gonna smoke per day? 5 grams per person? And they were like, well, that seems like a lot of hash. And by the end, we were each doing 10 grams per person per day. Sean's brother was rolling these fatties, and I was kind of taken aback, like that is a lot of hash in one joint. Yeah.
Yeah, that does sound pretty awesome. I love hash. I love hash. I'm a flower man. I heard there was a lot of tobacco smoking there, and I am now granted. I will say this: I did a hash spliff yesterday. Was it yesterday? Shit. What's today? Today's Thursday. No, a few days ago. It was a few days ago, and it surprised me at how smooth it was. It really surprised me. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit, and it went for a long time. And earlier that day, I had smoked a hash joint, and it was in that joint that I realized why most people do hash spliffs. um, because I got high. I got high. I got like almost uncomfortably like
I think it is uncomfortable.
To be
There's not a good synergy between flower and hash.
well,
To be fair, you rolled
this
this
one
one
was
like Sean's brother Tanner did. It was almost more hash than tobacco.
yeah, and I did the same thing with the weed. And so I mean, less like there's a lesson like learned with that. I went at it very hard. I feel like if I approached it differently, um, which the next joint that I do will be more weed than hash rather than more hash than weed. But yeah, no, that was one thing I was
But to be fair,
actually.
we brought out a Dynavap with us, which is a little mechanical
Oh
vaporizer.
yeah, that's right. I love I mean, actually, I can't say that I love it. I haven't tried it, but I love the concept of it.
Mm, mm. This is the way to go if you're not a tobacco smoker. You get a succession of hits. The first hit, pure terps, no smoke. Second hit, little smoke, less terps, and it goes all the way through to the last one is generally a fairly fat cloud. It's 100% efficiency, so you get every last molecule out of it, and you really get to see that progression. You get to really sample the taste of the hash in a way that you just cannot with tobacco or in chillums. And it gets you super loaded as well because it's all making its way to your brain. Yeah. So for those who are a little bit put off by the thought of smoking tobacco, there's definitely alternatives there. But when it comes to smoking with the locals, if you want to share a chillum with the boys, you better get ready.
Yeah, that oh yeah, I'm all about like respecting cultural norms. I was like thinking about my own like personal consumption. It's like, well, when I'm off on my own, I like but yeah, that's okay. We can
You gotta bust out the tray when you're with the locals.
yeah.
This was beautiful.
Nice.
This was my favorite souvenir, other than the time that I spent in India. Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah, I that is definitely something I'm gonna wanna do too. But I'm actually here. Well, let's we can continue this like part. Then we can continue this part in just a moment. After we wrap this stream up here. Oh boy, I'm giving myself more stuff to edit. But yes, okay. Let's oh nope, that's not right. Yeah, here we go. Oh yeah. Very awesome. This was like just a very cool stream. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit baked with the Cindy 99 that I was taking on, and it didn't quite strike me until I decided to like transition out of this conversation, out of our chat here. But yes, cannabis in Vietnam. Question to the audience: Would you go to Vietnam and smoke some weed? Like, would you like to go to Cambodia or Laos to try and check out some weed? Like, honestly, like, what country would you like to go and visit? And because to me personally, even though there may not be like a whole lot of like cannabis culture there, just the idea that there is cannabis culture in Vietnam, like, and that it's like oddly like kind of mirroring ours a little bit. This kind of bizarre world of like cannabis culture. I'm really intrigued. I think this is something I would want to check out. Um, what are some places that you would like to go? And also, what are some places that you have heard about that you think would be really cool to try and find some folks who have gone and experienced that culture? I mean, remember, cannabis is everywhere right now. We've got folks in Vietnam as we speak, doing some awesome stuff in Hanoi. I am and if I recall correctly, going to be heading down to what is it, Cambodia?
Going to Laos next, and
Laos.
that's the next couple of months. So one of our Patreon subscribers is trying to get some funds together to put us in Papua New Guinea and Madagascar this year. Those are really expensive and ambitious places to go collecting. Personally, if you'd ask me where I want to go, that's where I want to go. Zamal, the legendary cultivar from La Réunion, that's actually a Malagasy word for cannabis, and it was brought to Réunion from Madagascar by Malagasy workers. We really want to go up and down the east coast and see where everything is, and sort of it's uncharted territory for us, and I think for everybody else. So Madagascar is really high on the list of priorities. We just can't afford to get the team out there. It's the security situation, very big distances, travel, etc. And then Papua New Guinea, that's also even more uncharted as far as cannabis goes. The security situation is even more intense. We're gonna need a. We're gonna need. You saw how we travel, Ryan. We're like on foot, on buses, whatever. In Papua, we're gonna need a big old jeep and a security guard just to get out the city. Once we get out into the Goroka Highlands, which is where we really want to go collecting, that's gonna be back on foot and stuff. But yeah, we'd really like to get ourselves out to Papua New Guinea and to Madagascar. I think that's maybe where some Southeast Asian cannabis may have originated. Just to put some speculation out there. Don't quote me on that. But at least we need to get some boots on the ground to see what it's all about, and then we'll have some more solid info for y'all and some great seeds.
Yo, that sounds so dope. I am. Hey, you guys, I keep an eye out for the notifications because best believe it, I will be trying to cover that when it happens, unless like someone else beats me to it first. But yeah, guys, I appreciate having you all on.
Thanks for having us.
This was Enki's Canacult. Catch us out next week when we interview someone else. Um, and yeah, just remember, take time for yourself. Love yourself. Peace.